Okay guys, it's Weird Music Facts Round 2. Use these to show off at your next office party or whatever. Let's dive right in. Number 1. Weird music formats. The way we purchase and listen to music has changed a lot over the years. From the time when 8 tracks made a run for vinyl's dominance, to the brief era of the cassette and the eventual rise of the CD. But there's one obsolete music format that really stands out. And no, I'm not talking about hit clips. I'm talking about ringtones. During a brief few years in the late 2000s, ringtones were a billion-dollar industry, representing up to 10% of all music sales. In 2007, it was the second most popular music format by revenue, outpacing digital albums and singles, and only being topped by CDs. Yes, ringtones were second only to CDs. I guess for my Gen Z viewers, yeah, but people used to pay money to actually have a custom ring on their cell phone. A key reason for this is that ringtones were expensive. With a flip phone, you couldn't just connect to the internet and download a song from the cheapest website. You had to go through your cell phone's carrier, and they would charge $250 to $350 per ringtone. And this is despite the fact that ringtones only lasted about 15 seconds and sounded about as good as... But the allure of having Soulja Boy or Nickelback ring out as you fumble to silence your phone in the movie theater was so tempting that millennials and Gen Xers were willing to pay the price. According to a 2005 survey, half of young cell phone users paid for a ringtone at least once. Artists even admitted that ringtones were key to expanding their audience, as new fans would discover their music from hearing it on their friend's phone. So next time you hear someone complain that artists today are just writing music so that a little segment can go viral on TikTok, remember that 20 years ago, they were doing the exact same thing.
Over there, there's broken bones. There's only music, so that there's new ringtones.
Of course, one thing we probably all miss from the flip phone era was the lack of scam calls. Today, the average person gets somewhere between 13 and 34 fraudulent calls per month. This is in part due to the thousands of companies who are collecting, aggregating, and trading your personal data without you even knowing it. You have the right to email and ask them to remove your data, but it would take years to do this manually. That's where today's sponsor, Incogni, comes in. They reach out to data brokers on your behalf, request the removal of your personal data, and deal with any pushback. I've been using this service for a while now, and the number of scam calls I get has dropped significantly. It can also prevent spam mail and other advertisements that reveal a creepy amount of personal information, like your medical history, or the fact that you were Googling Ukrainian punk bands, and suddenly this appears in your email. I didn't click it. Also, Incogni's unlimited plans now offer a custom removal feature, where you can target specific sites and have Incogni handle the data removal. Sign up today by going to incogni.com/bandsplaining, or click the link in the description and enter code bandsplaining at checkout to get an exclusive 60% off your annual plan. Once again, that code is bandsplaining, or just click the link in the description. Okay, and fact number 2. Number 2, weird music venues. Every so often, you hear about gigs taking place in odd locations. A rave at an abandoned rainforest cafe, a metal show at a Wendy's. Oftentimes, the event seems designed to generate clicks more than anything. However, there's one particular music venue that's absolutely no gimmick, despite how odd the location seems.
Sonntagmorgen, 5:30 Uhr. Einfahrt in das Areal des Frankfurter Flughafens.
Germany's Dorian Gray was a dance club that operated inside of Frankfurt's airport. And no, this wasn't in some abandoned airplane hangar off to the side. This was in the main terminal, after passing through a security check. Despite the inconveniences, the club was extremely popular. It was open for over 2 decades, and became pivotal to the development of German techno, and later trance. But why an airport? More than anything, the answer seems to be dumb luck. In 1978, founders Gerd Schuler and Michael Pressinger already owned several restaurants and clubs when they were approached by a representative of the airport. There was room to open something in the empty terminal basement. The airport was eager to attract more visitors, whether they were actually flying or not. Schuler and Pressinger managed to land the space rent-free, and went about designing an elaborate, multi-level club inspired by New York's Studio 54. They flew out notable sound system designer Richard Lawn, who, according to Garrett's autobiography, built the speakers with hand-picked wood from the Taunus Mountains. The sound would become legendary in its own right.
Das ist eine Musik, die fühlt man, ne? Die hört man nicht einfach nur und die muss man laut hören, die muss man fühlen. Der Bass, der muss durch den Körper gehen und dementsprechend muss ich mich bewegen, ja.
When the club first opened in the late 70s, it specialized in high-energy disco music, like Sylvester's You Make Me Feel. However, in the mid-80s, DJ Tala 2XLC was contracted to host weekly events at Dorian Gray called Tekno Club. This early use of the phrase techno originally just referred to electronic pop music, inspired by bands like Kraftwerk or Depeche Mode. However, soon, Frankfurt was pioneering its own flavor of Detroit techno, introducing more melody and atmosphere, a style that would become known as trance. The fact that a club inside the airport of Germany's fifth largest city could become a global music hub sounds like a serious underdog story. But Dorian Gray's location had some key advantages. For one, it wasn't subject to the city's nightclub curfew, and thus was open all hours of the night, or rather, morning. It was the de facto final stop after all the other clubs closed. While most Frankfurters were eating lunch, Dorian Gray was just reaching its peak. Secondly, its location within the airport meant that patrons and DJs alike could easily fly in and visit without ever having to hail a cab. It was a necessary stop for anyone visiting, and you had no excuses not to pop in, provided you met the dress code. Named after Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray, it was intended to be a place of excess. There were beach parties where the ground was covered in sand, Formula One cars, camels, and elephants. However, a disastrous fire at Dusseldorf Airport in 1996 led to a stricter fire code across Germany, and rather than update the club, Dorian Gray's owners opted to shut it down. Its final night was December 31st, 2000. To my knowledge, no other club like this has appeared since. And it's hard to imagine one would. In the post-9/11 world, airports prefer to keep the spontaneity to a minimum. The phrase airport club today conjures the image of a clean, Starbucks-like waiting room with tiny plates. A very far cry from the utter debauchery that was Dorian Gray. Number 3, Weird Eras. Despite what Garden State or Nick and Nora would lead you to believe, the 2000s was not the golden age of indie rock. That title belongs to the late 50s and 1960s. Of course, this is using the true definition of indie music. Not just bands who wear cardigans and love Neutral Milk Hotel, but rather bands who are signed to an independent record label. In the 50s and 60s, indie record labels had a much more dominant position in the industry. This graph looks at the top 50 singles in the US by year and compares how many hits came from a major record label versus an independent one. At times, over half the chart was indie, whereas today that number is in the low single digits. In 2022, the only songs from independent labels came from Morgan Wallen's Big Loud and Bad Bunny's Remus Entertainment. Now, real quick, I just want to clarify what an indie label actually means. Unlike the difference between a microbrewery and a macrobrewery, there's no specific point at which an indie label becomes major. However, across history, there's always been a few dominant players, while a few small upstarts attempt to disrupt them. In the 50s and 60s, this meant labels like Dot, Chess, and Motown. These were, at the time, small regional labels that drafted local talent and popularized new genres like blues, R&B, and rock and roll, which, during this era of heavy racial segregation, major labels weren't willing to touch. In an older video, we talked about how these labels often had to fight their way onto the radio by literally bribing DJs, an act that was illegal. But personally, I'm grateful they did, because otherwise we may have never had the explosion of counterculture music that continues today. Of course, indie labels can also become major labels over time. Atlantic Records was independent when it released hits by the Coasters and the Bobettes in 1957. However, 1 decade later, it was purchased by Warner Brothers, signed Led Zeppelin, and became the rock powerhouse it's remembered as today. This is a key reason why indie labels' dominance on the charts has decreased year after year. Major labels have gone on a tear, buying up the most successful indies and consolidating. In 1972, there were 27 different record labels represented in the top 50. In 2022, that number has decreased to 5. The 3 major labels and the 2 aforementioned indies, Rimas Entertainment and Big Loud. While many lament the corporate takeover of the charts, there's no denying that indie bands have thrived under the radar, introducing radical new sounds that arguably have had an even bigger role in shaping our culture. It's a key reason why many music fans today feel completely divorced from the Billboard charts, and why probably very few of you actually watch the Grammys. Still, I think it's pretty neat that once upon a time, the most radical music innovators were also the most celebrated. Plus, next time your millennial friend tells you they love the indie rock era, you can respond, "Yeah, I love Chuck Berry." Number 4, weird languages. Non-lexical vocables. This is the term for words commonly sung in music that aren't actually words. Your la-la-las and na-na-nas. There's tons of examples of gibberish lyrics over the years. Even more when you consider songs that aren't strictly English gibberish, but Spanish gibberish, for example. Or Icelandic gibberish. But there's one example that really takes the cake. It seems to reappear on Reddit or Instagram every few years, because the experience of listening to it, at least as a native English speaker, is just so eerie. I'm talking about Prisencolinensinainciusol.
We don't stay in the shoes now and whole build the scene in a whole rate, maybe get the corner boss dying.
Okay, let's back up a second. Adriano Celentano is an Italian singer-songwriter. He's been called the Italian Elvis. He got his start singing old-school rock and roll, and now his most popular tracks are romantic ballads he recorded in the 80s. But in the early 70s, Adriano was in an experimental mood. According to an Italian magazine, his last album was full of songs that wanted to say something. So this time around, he wanted to record a song that, quite conversely, didn't say anything. In a move quite innovative for its time, Adriano created a loop of a drum beat and started improvising on top of it. But rather than sing in his native Italian, Celentano decided to emulate the American rock idols of his youth. He began to unleash a slick cascade of slang-ridden verses. The only problem was, he didn't actually speak English.
Well, I sit on sleeping at the king on the scene till I just an open off how hard to get down, left face go.
Did you catch any of that? As Celentano later told NPR, he grew up loving American vocalists and American slang. He clearly has an intuitive understanding of the syllables and inflection points that characterize American English. Enough that he can actually trick your ear. You turn the music up thinking, maybe I just need to listen more carefully.
We the scene in the scene when the shoes come up in. This is too early call the love for all the guy to stay.
But no, there's nothing there. Some people have humorously attempted to transcribe the lyrics.
You the come not choose no brain for not sure home this skin love to come enough time.
But Celentano himself has confirmed there's no intelligibility to them, except for the word alright. For native English speakers, it gives you the rare opportunity to hear what English sounds like to an outsider, and to realize how choppy and abrasive the language can be, which was apparently what Celentano intended. He told NPR he wanted the theme to be the inability to communicate, echoing the biblical tale of the Tower of Babel. Prisencolinensinainciusol, which, yes, is the name of the song, was not initially well received in Italy. However, after a TV appearance where Celentano dressed like an English teacher, lecturing a class of enthusiastic schoolgirls, the song started to take off. It hit the top 10 in Italy, Belgium, and the Netherlands. In late 1973, the song entered the American market. Despite claims that it briefly charted in the US, I found no evidence that this actually happened. At least not on any Billboard charts. And it's easy to understand why. At a time when call-in requests to radio stations were a key way for songs to build momentum, the 9-syllable title of Prisencolinensinainciusol did not exactly roll off the tongue. However, it was the perfect oddity for the internet age. In 2009, a blog called Boing shared a video, and it's been getting rediscovered ever since. Many point out the fact that its looped rhythm section and fast-paced talk singing are comparable to hip-hop, a genre that wouldn't emerge in its recognizable form for several more years, leading to the lighthearted claim that Celentano invented hip-hop. Though it may have taken 50 years, the song has clearly begun to resonate with Americans, as several TV shows have licensed it for their soundtracks. So, who knows? Maybe with Bandsplaining's immense musical influence, we'll get this onto the Billboard charts for real. We don't actually think that highly of ourselves. Alright guys, this concludes Volume 2 of Weird Music Facts. We are not responsible for the friendships that you will lose by reciting these like a maniac at your next party. However, if you're craving more, be sure to check out Volume 1, or just subscribe to this channel for even more deep dives into niche genres and weird music history. Alright, see ya. Just a side note, guys, it is so hard for me to say facts. I really want to say facts. Weird music facts. So just forgive me. That's going to be a recurring problem. I can't solve that.